That night changed everything. I was alone at home while Henry was away on a business trip. The house felt quiet and still, and I had no idea what was about to happen. It was later on midnight when I stood in my room, slowly changing into a new dress. I felt a mix of excitement and loneliness. The room was dimly lit, and the moonlight crept through the curtains, painting soft patterns on the floor. I tried to think of Henry, but my thoughts danced away, leaving me feeling empty. I heard a soft noise at the door, and my heart began to beat faster. Who could that be at this time? My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was the wind or the old house settling. But deep down, I felt something was wrong. The noise came again, a slow creak of the door. I stopped what I was doing, my body tense, afraid to move. It felt like the night was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The door opened a bit more, and in the dim light, I saw a figure. My breath caught. It was Alex, my son. He stood in the doorway with wide eyes, clearly shocked. I felt like time stopped for a moment. I didn't know how to react. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. This was not something I could have ever imagined. Alex didn't say a word at first. He just stared, and I saw fear and confusion in his eyes. It was a look I had never seen before. Slowly, he stepped into the room, his bare feet making soft sounds on the carpet. I could feel the heaviness of the moment, like a thick blanket around us. I knew that what he saw was not normal, but I didn't know how to explain it. I tried to speak. I finally managed a quiet, "Alex, what are you doing here?" I felt my face warm up with embarrassment and worry. There was so much going on in my head. How could this happen? What should I do? What does he see in me right now? Alex swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he found the words, "Mom, I saw you. I didn't mean to scare you." His words made my heart ache, because I knew this moment was going to change everything between us. The truth of what he saw was too much for us both. I led him out of the room gently. We sat down in the living room, and the silence stretched out between us. My mind raced with questions. Did he think I was doing something wrong? Was this why he was here at this odd hour? I could see the conflict in his eyes, and it made me feel like I was falling apart inside. He looked at me with a mix of shock and something else, something I couldn't quite place. There was confusion, hurt, and maybe even a bit of something more. I felt like I was looking at a stranger who once was my son, and I didn't know how to reach him now. The weight of the situation pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. It was then that I realized how alone I truly felt. Henry was away, and now my son and I faced a moment that we both could not understand. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him that everything would be okay, but I was not sure how to put those feelings into words. As the minutes passed, Alex finally spoke again. "Mom, I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable. I didn't expect to see you like that." His voice was soft, trembling, and it broke my heart. I reached out and gently touched his arm, trying to show him that I was not angry, but that I was also scared of what came next. I whispered, "It's okay, Alex. I know this is strange for both of us." But inside, I was not so sure. There was so much more happening between us than just the shock of being caught. There was a secret that lay hidden, something that had been brewing beneath the surface for a while. I had not wanted to face it, and now it was here, right in front of us. In that quiet living room, I could see our reflections in the dark. Window 2. People bound by a love that was more complicated than we had thought. I thought about the past, about the subtle touches and moments of closeness that we never talked about. They suddenly made sense in a new, frightening light. Alex looked up, meeting my eyes. He asked, "Mom, are you okay?" "What's going on?" His question made me pause. I didn't want to lie to him, but the truth was not something I could say all at once. I had to find the right words, and they had to be simple enough for him to understand, but honest enough to carry the weight of what we were feeling. Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. It was loud and abrupt, jarring us both from our troubled thoughts. My heart raced again. Who would come at such a time? Was it someone who knew our secret? I looked at Alex, and for a moment, the fear of the unknown in his eyes mirrored my own. I stood up slowly, feeling the sweat on my brow, and walked to the door. I opened it just a crack and peeked out, but saw no one there. The hallway was dark and empty. I closed the door and tried to laugh it off, but the sound was hollow. The knock had rattled me. It was as if fate was tapping on our door, urging us to confront what was happening. Alex moved closer to me, his eyes filled with questions. "What was that about?" he whispered, his voice shaking. I shrugged, trying to sound casual, but I felt a knot in my stomach. "I don't know. Maybe it was the wind." I wasn't sure that was true, but I needed to keep him calm. The house was too quiet now, and every little sound seemed to carry meaning. We decided to sit back down, but the air was thick with tension. I could tell Alex was struggling to process everything. I patted the space next to me, inviting him to sit down. He hesitated but then joined me. Our conversation was tentative at first, but we knew we had to talk. He looked at me for a long time, and in his eyes, I saw a mix of fear, confusion, and something deeper that I didn't fully understand. I took a deep breath and told him, "Alex, I never meant for you to see me like that. I'm sorry if I made you feel uneasy." My voice was soft and shaky. I hoped my honesty would help him feel safe. Alex nodded slowly. "I don't know what to think," he admitted. "It's all so strange. I always trusted you, but now I'm confused." His words echoed in my ears. He had always been my rock. And now, I felt like I was breaking that trust without knowing how. I tried to think of the right words, but they seemed to slip away. Instead, I started talking about simple things, how the night was quiet, how the moonlight looked in the room, anything to ease the tension between us. I hoped that by grounding our conversation in normalcy, we could find a way out of this strange moment. As our conversation continued, I saw little signs of comfort. Alex relaxed slightly when we talked about everyday things, like his day at school and the new book he was reading. But the shadow of what had happened hung over us, unspoken, but present. There were moments when he would ask a question, then change the subject, and I realized he was afraid of hearing the truth. I could tell that neither of us wanted to bring the heavy truth into the open yet. We both felt it weighing on our hearts, and saying too much too soon might break something fragile. The silence between us often felt louder than the words we spoke, but I was determined to keep the conversation going. As the hours passed, I noticed that Alex seemed calmer, but he was still not himself. I could see him glancing at the closed door, as if expecting someone or something to come. I wondered if he was still thinking about what he saw, or if he was worried about what might happen next. The uncertainty was like a storm cloud hanging over us. In that dark room, our faces were lit only by the soft glow of the moon through the window. I reached out and gently squeezed Alex's hand. He looked at me, and for a moment our eyes met. There was a silent understanding there, a promise that we would get through this together, even if we were both scared and confused. I thought back to the past few weeks. There were small moments between us that felt more than just mother and son. Things like a lingering hug or a look that lasted a little too long. I had pushed them aside as nothing more than care, but now I wondered if we had started to cross a line without realizing it. The thought made me uneasy, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without knowing what Alex truly felt. Alex cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Mom, I need to tell you something about what I saw," he started, his voice quiet. I nodded, bracing myself. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. His words were slow and careful, and I could see him choosing them carefully. "When I saw you changing, I felt like something was not right. Not just for me, but for us. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like we were not just mother and son anymore." His words hit me hard. I didn't know how to respond without revealing too much. It was too soon for all the truth, but I knew I had to say something. I swallowed and said, "Alex, I know this is hard. I feel it too, but I'm not sure what to do. I tried to keep my tone calm, even though I was shaking inside. Alex looked at me with tears in his eyes. I don't want to hurt you, Mom, he whispered, but I need to know what we do now. His question hung in the air, heavy and full of fear. I felt a lump in my throat because I didn't have an answer. I only knew that something deep had changed between us that night. And I wasn't sure if we could go back to how things were. I looked out the window at the moonlit night, thinking about what to say. The quiet of the house seemed to press in on us, and every small sound was magnified. I wanted to protect him, to shield us from the consequences of this moment, but I didn't know how. As the night wore on, I realized I needed to calm down before I could talk to Alex properly. I gently guided him to lie down on the couch, suggesting we rest for a bit. The couch was not as comfortable as my bed, but it felt safer for this moment. I turned off the light, and we sat in the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. Alex nodded, and his eyes grew heavy. Before he drifted off, he looked at me and said, "Mom, I hope we can figure this out together." His voice was small, yet full of hope. I smiled weakly and whispered, "I will do my best, Alex. We will get through this." That was the last clear moment of the night. In the quiet dark, I lay awake thinking about what came next, wondering how the next morning would unfold, and fearing what new challenges our secret might bring. I could feel my heart pounding like a drum as I stood there, caught in such a sudden and awkward moment. The shock on Alex's face was clear, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. I tried to steady my breath, but my hands shook. I said something soft, hoping to ease his fear, but I realized my voice was trembling too. I saw him take a step back, his face a mix of worry and surprise, and I knew this was not going to be easy. The silence stretched out between us, thick and heavy. I needed to say something, but I didn't know how to start. I looked at Alex, not just as my son, but as someone who was now part of a very delicate and complicated situation. His eyes were wide, and I could see he was trying to understand what he had just seen. "I'm sorry you had to see that," I finally managed to whisper, my words almost lost in the quiet of the room. Alex didn't respond right away. He just stood there, his face unreadable, and I could tell he was trying to sort out his feelings. My mind raced with questions. Was he angry? Confused? Scared? I took a small step toward him, hoping that my gesture would show him I cared and wanted to help him feel safe. "Alex," I said gently, "I know this is a shock. I didn't mean to scare you." He blinked, his eyes darting away for a moment, and then he looked back at me. There was a flash of hurt in them that made me feel a pang in my chest. "Mom, why were you changing?" he asked, his voice small and cautious. There was an edge in his tone that I hadn't heard before. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper, something that made me feel like I had broken a promise. I sighed and tried to find the right words. "I was just trying on a dress," I explained, hoping that was enough. But I knew that answer wouldn't ease the unease between us. Alex looked at me for a long moment, his brow furrowed in confusion. He took another step back, and I noticed the way his hands were shaking slightly. I wondered what he was thinking. Could he have thought something more was going on? I remembered the troubled look he had when he first walked in, and my heart ached. I didn't want him to feel like he had seen me in a way that was more than just a mother, but deep down, I knew there was so much more in our story than this simple moment of being caught. There was a long pause before he finally spoke again. "Mom, I don't know what to think," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. I nodded slowly, understanding his turmoil. I had to be careful with my next words. I didn't want to give him the wrong idea, or make him feel more confused. "It's okay," I tried to reassure him. "It was just a normal moment, and I'm sorry if it made you uncomfortable." He looked at me with eyes full of uncertainty. I could see him trying to process everything, his mind racing with questions. The room seemed to close in on us as the silence hung heavy. I reached out tentatively, wanting to comfort him, but I wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do. Instead, I let my words do the talking. Alex, we can talk about how you feel, but I need you to be honest with me. What are you feeling right now? Alex swallowed hard, and his hands fidgeted with the edge of his shirt. I don't know, he admitted softly. His voice wavered, and I could see the effort it took for him to speak. I saw something that I wasn't expecting, and it's messing with my head. His words made my own heart thump painfully. I didn't want him to feel like he was alone in his confusion. I nodded. It's all right, Alex. You don't have to have all the answers right now. We just need to figure this out together. I tried to smile, hoping to bring some comfort to him. I could see that he was looking for reassurance in my face, something to hold on to. The normal boundaries between us felt like they were shifting, and I wasn't sure how to set them back. He took a deep breath, and I watched as his shoulders relaxed just a little. There was a moment when I thought maybe we could move past this. But then his expression turned serious again. Mom, this isn't just about me seeing you change, he began hesitantly, his voice quiet but firm. I felt a shiver run down my spine. What could he be thinking? He continued. I've been feeling something strange, and I don't know what to do. His eyes searched mine for answers. I realized he was not just talking about what he saw, but about the feelings we both might share that were even more complicated. My heart felt heavy with a mix of fear and something else I couldn't quite name. I put a hand on his shoulder, hoping to give him some comfort. It's okay, I whispered. Just tell me what's on your mind. His fingers curled around mine for a moment, and I could feel his tension. He took a shaky breath. I think I'm confused about more than just what I saw. I see you differently now. He looked away, embarrassed and scared, as if the words had tasted bitter on his tongue. The room felt small, and I could almost hear the pounding of my heart in my ears. I tried to keep my voice steady, even though I felt a surge of emotion. See me differently, I repeated gently, trying to understand. He nodded slowly, his eyes filling with tears. I don't know how to handle it. I felt a lump in my throat. This was bigger than what I had expected. I took a step closer, wanting to bridge the gap that was forming between us, but unsure of how far to go. Alex, I said softly, we can face this together, but we need to take it one step at a time. What are you feeling right now? He looked at me with eyes that were searching for hope, for some clarity. I'm scared, Mom, he admitted. I feel something that I've never felt before, but I don't know what it means for us. His voice cracked under the weight of his confession, and I could see how hard it was for him to speak his truth. I sat down beside him on the couch, feeling his weight as he sank next to me. I reached out and gently took his hand, not knowing if that would help but hoping it would. It's okay to be scared, I told him. I'm scared too. But we can talk about it, and we can figure this out, step by step. The conversation went on for what felt like hours. We walked through our feelings carefully, each word chosen to avoid hurting the other more than necessary. There were moments of silence when words failed us, and in those moments, we simply held on to each other's presence. It felt strange but also comforting to know we were not alone in our confusion. At one point, I remembered something I had heard before, how secrets have a way of growing heavier over time. I wondered if it was true for us. Alex, I said softly, do you think this moment will change things between us forever? He looked at me, his eyes serious. I don't know, Mom. I just know that I can't go back to how things were. Not really. His words hung in the air, and I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. It was a lot to take in. I tried to push down the feeling of guilt and confusion, telling myself that we would find a way to work through this. But inside, I felt like my world was tilting, and I wasn't sure I could stop it. We sat there in the quiet room for a while longer, each of us lost in thought. I tried to think of what to say next, something that could bring us back to a place of understanding. Alex, I finally said, maybe we can take some time to cool off and think about what we really want. We don't have to rush through this. He nodded, but I could tell the worry hadn't left his eyes. The night grew deeper, and the only sounds were the soft hum of the house at rest and our gentle breathing. I hoped that soon the shock would wear off, and we could talk more clearly. But even as I whispered comforting words, I knew that what we shared was more complex than any single conversation could fix. The morning light peeked through the curtains, casting a gentle glow over the room. I woke up to find Alex still there, sitting quietly on the couch, his head in his hands. It looked like he hadn't slept well, and the sorrow in his eyes made my heart hurt. I sat beside him, careful not to frighten him, and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good morning, Alex," I said softly. He looked up, and for a moment his eyes were red but hopeful. "Good morning, Mom," he replied. The silence between us was comfortable now, more like the calm after a storm. But I knew our conversation from last night still hung between us, unspoken yet heavy. As the day went on, we tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. We had breakfast together, but there were moments when we both seemed lost in thought, stealing glances at each other. I could tell he was still processing everything that had happened, and I was too. I didn't push him to talk more that morning, allowing the day to pass slowly, hoping that each small moment of normality would help us heal. Later in the afternoon, Alex and I ended up in the kitchen, working on a simple task together. There was an awkwardness that hung over us, but also a quiet determination to keep going. I glanced at him as he chopped vegetables, and he looked back at me, giving a small smile that made my heart warm a bit. But even that smile was tinged with uncertainty. "I thought about what you said last night," Alex started, his voice tentative. "About taking time to think." He paused, setting down his knife carefully. "I think I do need that time. But I also think talking to you more might help." His words were cautious, yet filled with a hint of hope. It made me feel we were slowly finding our way. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. "I agree," I said. "We can take it slow, and we can share what we feel. There's no rush." I tried to sound confident, although my own emotions were a storm beneath the calm surface. I wanted to give him the space he needed, but I also worried about the silent distance growing between us. The conversation that afternoon became a small beacon of hope. We shared little thoughts and feelings, like pieces of a puzzle we both wanted to solve. I told him about how I felt torn between my duties and my heart, and he confessed his fear of losing me or doing something wrong. Each small admission felt like a step toward healing. Yet the shadow of our shared secret never fully left the room. Even as we talked, I could sense a curiosity in Alex, a question left unasked on his lips. I didn't want to push him to learn more too soon, but I knew that eventually we would have to face the reality of what was happening between us. The thought made me uneasy, but I also knew that avoiding it forever would not help either of us. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed our conversation over and over. I thought about the trust that we were trying to rebuild and the fragile bond that was slowly forming in the aftermath of his discovery. I wondered if our relationship could return to something normal again, or if it would forever be tinged with a new, uneasy truth. I heard a soft knock on my door in the middle of the night. I sat up suddenly, my heart racing. Was that Alex? Should I open the door? My mind filled with thoughts of what might happen if I did. At the same time, I needed to know he was okay. Gently, I got up and walked to the door, my footsteps slow and careful. As I opened it, there he stood, the moonlight casting shadows on his face, his eyes searching mine for comfort. "Mom, I couldn't sleep," he said quietly, his voice trembling slightly. I stepped aside to let him in, and as he walked into the room, I noticed how close we stood, sharing the same space, yet feeling the weight of our unspoken fears. We sat down on the edge of the bed, the silence between us a mix of comfort and tension. I looked into his eyes, hoping to find answers, and he looked back, his face filled with questions. I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew we could face another night together, slowly uncovering the truth of our feelings, one careful step at a time. I sat with Alex in the dim light of our living room, My heart was beating so fast I thought Alex could hear it too. He looked at me with worried eyes, his face full of questions. I wasn't sure what to say. The truth felt like a heavy blanket on my shoulders. I had just seen him after he had caught me changing, and now he seemed to carry secrets of his own. The room was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Alex finally spoke in a small voice. "Mom, I saw you changing, but there's something more. I feel like there's more going on here than you told me." His words were slow and careful, like he was picking them out of his heart. I felt a lump in my throat. I wanted to tell him everything, but I also knew that some things were hard to explain. He looked at his hands, twisting them in his lap. "I don't know how to act now. I keep thinking about that night, and about what I saw." His voice trembled a little. I reached out to take his hand, but he pulled away slightly. The distance between us felt bigger than the space in the room. I cleared my throat, trying to find the right words. "Alex, I know that was a lot for you to take in. I never meant for you to feel scared or confused." My voice was soft and shaky. The silence stretched on, and I wondered if my words had made things worse. The questions in his eyes made me feel like I was under a bright spotlight. I looked down at my own hands, feeling the weight of his trust and fear. "There's so much I want to say, but I'm not sure how." "You deserve the truth." Alex nodded slowly. "I just need to understand why." His simple words reminded me that sometimes kids just want to make sense of things in their own way. But this was not just any old problem. This was something that had grown in our hearts, tangled in ways I hadn't expected. I took a deep breath. "I think we both have questions, and maybe we can help each other find some answers." My words sounded hopeful, but I could see Alex was still unsure. The quiet in the room was almost like a wall between us. He looked up at me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Mom, did you ever feel like I do? Did you ever feel something that you couldn't put into words?" The innocence in his voice made my chest tighten. I hadn't planned on answering that so openly. For a moment, I thought about lying to protect him, but lying would only create more hurt later. "There have been times," I admitted softly, "where I've felt things that confused me too." The words came out quietly, like a secret shared under a blanket on a cold night. Alex seemed to relax a bit at that, but his eyes still searched mine for honesty. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why did we keep it a secret?" His question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I tried to explain without giving away everything. "Some things are hard to talk about. I was scared of what might happen if I said too much." He sighed, a sound that felt like a small, broken piece of glass. "I feel scared now, Mom. I don't know how to be around you after that night." His words cut me deeply. I knew I had to be strong for him, even though I felt like my own heart was breaking. I squeezed his hand gently. "I know, Alex, but we are going to get through this together. We don't have to have all the answers now. We just need to talk and listen to each other." He nodded again, but his eyes stayed sad. I wondered if he truly believed me. I wanted him to know that I was there, even if I didn't have all the right words. The truth about our situation was complicated, and I wasn't sure how to share it without hurting him more. The clock ticked louder in the silence that followed. I thought about the first time I really saw Alex grow up, the boy who used to run to me when he was hurt, the boy who trusted me with his small secrets. Now, here he was, grown but still my little boy, facing feelings he couldn't understand. It made me feel both proud and incredibly sad. "We don't have to solve everything tonight," I said after a long pause. "Maybe we can take it step by step. Can we do that?" My voice was hopeful, like a small light in a dark room. He looked at me, and I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I think so," he whispered. But his words didn't fully erase the worry in his voice. "I'm still confused, Mom. I wish I knew what to do." I wanted to tell him that it was okay to be confused. I wanted to say that feelings were messy and sometimes hard to fix. But I also knew he needed my guidance and love to find his way. "It's okay to be confused," I said, choosing my words carefully. We have a lot to figure out, but we'll do it together. We don't need to rush." His fingers curled around his arms, and I could see he was holding himself together. "I heard people say that love is strong, but it can also hurt a lot." He looked up at me, his eyes wide. "I don't know if I can handle the hurt, Mom." My heart ached at his fear. "I know, Alex. Love can hurt, but it also heals. We'll find a way, I promise. We just need time." I tried to sound reassuring, but I felt like a tiny boat in a huge storm, hoping for calm waters ahead. The night grew deeper around us, and our small conversation felt like a drop of light in darkness. I wasn't sure if I was giving him the answers he needed, or just adding to his confusion. But I knew one thing. We had to keep talking, keep sharing, or else the hurt would only grow bigger. I reached out and gently touched his shoulder. "Let's try to speak slowly, okay? One truth at a time. If something hurts you, please tell me." My voice was gentle, soothing, like a soft breeze on a hot day. He nodded, but I could see the tears forming in his eyes. "I will, Mom. I just need to feel safe." "I'm here," I whispered. "We are safe. Just for now, can we try to focus on how we can make things better?" I thought of the many small moments we shared before, all the laughter, the hugs. I wanted to bring some of that back, to lighten the heavy air between us. Alex took a shaky breath. "Maybe we can start by just spending time together, like we used to." His words were simple, but they held a lot of meaning. It was like he was asking to go back to a time when things were easier. But he knew we couldn't truly go back. I smiled softly. "I would like that. Maybe we can watch a movie or share a meal, without talking about the scary stuff for a bit." It was a small step, but maybe enough to build a bridge back to trust. As the night wore on, we found a rhythm in our conversation. Not all of our questions were answered, but we shared small bits of truth. He told me about his day at school, his friends, and even his fears about the future. I listened closely, not just to his words, but to the feelings behind them. The more he shared, the more I saw him as not just my son, but as a person dealing with complex feelings he couldn't fully explain. I wondered if sharing these small moments could make it easier for us to face the harder truths later. At times, we laughed softly at silly memories, and those moments felt like precious jewels in the darkness. They didn't erase the hurt or the confusion, but they gave us a bit of warmth. I kept thinking about his confession from that night. What did he really see in me? Was it innocence mixed with something else? The answers were buried deep, and I wasn't ready to unravel them yet. I didn't want to frighten him with more truths than he could handle at that moment. "Do you remember when you were little, and you used to hide behind the curtains while playing?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. "We would laugh together when you scared me by jumping out." Alex smiled faintly. "Yeah, I remember. Those were good times." That memory seemed to give both of us a little relief from the heavy air. It reminded us that our bond was deep and strong, even if it was complicated now. I paused, then asked quietly, "Do you think our bond will change because of everything that's happening?" I wasn't sure what his answer would be, but I needed to know how he felt about our future together. He looked down at his hands, as if they held the answer. "I don't know, Mom. I just know it's different now, and that scares me. But I also know I don't want to lose you. I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to think of it. What are your thoughts on it?" I'm curious about other people's opinions on this, and that's why I am telling this story. It is crazy what happened, but I can't deny it. On top of that, I am never able to turn things back.